There it is. The session is being recorded. So thank you very much for that, Stacy, so that we can revisit as needed. Good morning, Jamer. All right. So, before we start today, as you see, we're going to look at some more ethical considerations for recovery coaches. We're going to look at the importance of decision making. We're going to look at some decision making matrices and talk a little bit about ethical committees and the importance in our organizations and amongst ourselves as recovery coaches. Are there any thoughts before we begin? Any thoughts or feedback from that you've had over the last week as it related to our discussions of last week or even the week before? Okay. Seeing no typing, we'll move ahead. Okay. By the end of this webinar, learning again with and from each other and our experiences, we'll hope to have achieved the following. So we're going to explore ethical decision-making strategies and matrices. We're going to try to explain the benefits of an ethics committee, describe the influence of decision-making matrices and ethical committees on both private and organizationally based recovery coaches, and hopefully we'll understand the process and impact of setting up and sustaining, and that's a key word there, sustaining an ethics committee within an organization or a recovery coach learning collaborative. That may be a phrase we're not terribly familiar with as independent recovery coaches if you're out working in the field independently, but the importance of creating a learning collaborative can be very, very helpful, especially where ethics are concerned. And I'll quickly review our process again. You will have received the prepared scenario, or you would have received the scenario in advance for today. So we'll review that as a group, going over the answers and your thoughts, and again, any new thoughts that come to you based on our discussions. Then we'll take a look at another scenario. In real time, we'll review that one. Then we'll do that quick think breakout session again and do our best to navigate to it and have the conversations with each other in the small groups and then bring it back to the large group and share. In this way, we get to learn 3 times as much information. So, oh, good morning, Davy. And then last but not least, we'll do a Q&A and we'll cover questions from across the range. So again, there may be questions specific to this webinar, but because this is the last in the series, I'm happy to entertain questions, and I'm sure the whole group will be happy to answer questions related to any of the subjects we've touched on over the last 3 weeks. So as Stacy said first thing this morning, I cannot believe it is the third one already. So with that, shall we move ahead? Okay. I'll read this one. The legal profession regularly distributes information on a variety of topics of interest to consumers. That's you and me. This information may relate to common questions about criminal charges and consequences, such as DUI, DWI, theft, fraud, things like that, or to common life events that require legal documentation, so wills, estates, real estate transfers, and things like that. Procedural information and common legal forms for individuals, businesses, and organizations are also available. In order to promote ethical conduct, many states have special rules and/or requirements that help differentiate legal advertising from information. The rise of social media has blurred many of these lines. I did notice the typo, and it's fixed on the formal one. Now, state bar associations have enacted very specific policies regarding what is or is not considered advertising, even determining to which electronic platforms and social media sites, websites, blogs, real-time electronic contact, and site-based designations, what you might call yourself, a specialist, an expert, how these policies apply. In addition to solicitation, the industry has examined ethical challenges raised by use of social media, including contradictory statements made by lawyers in person versus posted, ex parte communication, that's communication that takes place outside of a lawyer being present, the lawyer for the person being present, confidentiality breach, and much, much more. One result has been the development of exclusive social media sites where lawyers may share information and conversation more freely with each other, and a variety of industry-specific educational coursework and information on social media use and misuse has also been developed. I know that's a lot to swallow, so I'll give you a minute, and I'm glad you have it in front of you. So let's look at that first question. As questions about appropriate use of social media arise, what components, based on the scenario we just read, and processes are in place to make it easier for lawyers' ongoing ethical decision making? Go ahead. As I said, don't worry about syntax or spelling or any of that good stuff. Just share what you think. What, based on what we read about lawyers, would indicate that they have some components and processes in place to make it easier for lawyers to act ethically? Yep, absolutely. A website where lawyers can communicate in private with one another. Indeed. That is one way they've dealt with this. Yep. Exactly. These are questions that they've considered. Skype, yep, so that you are one-on-one. They do indeed have meetings, lots and lots of meetings. Yes, exactly. That was a big response to the need for lawyers to communicate with each other, but to do so privately so that, again, their comments are not taken out of context and or misunderstood or Mhm. Go back to the beginning of that scenario, the idea that they have really regulated, they have rules and specific regulations that pertain to even what kind of things may be communicated. What is information versus what is advice? Any other thoughts? Yep, Jamer, I see you're typing. Yes, all of the above. Thank you, Euphemia. I missed that. Why is it important in the legal profession to have such stringent uh, boundaries, I guess is a great word, for one's behavior, especially online? Yes, a code of ethics, they must, yep. And they talk about a case, but they can't reveal their client's name. Absolutely, attorney-client privilege. Thank you, Janet. Yes, privacy is not breached. Indeed. Indeed. So what inputs, when they're considering making these rules or expanding the nature of their conversations or trying to figure out ways to have these conversations privately or share things that might not be public, what kinds of input do you think they routinely consider? What kind of inputs? Yep, conflict of interest, depending on the case. What are the interests of the client? What are the interests of the public? How important is it to have public information, and how important is it to keep things private? Yep, absolutely. Looking at past case history, those who've been harmed. That goes back to that fiduciary. We have a special obligation to protect. Absolutely. Yep, Janet, indeed. Thank you. Yes. Yes. What's their profit motive? Are they doing it to share information? Are they doing it to generate business? That's that big, big distinction between what is information and what is advertising. And yes, procedural developments would be an input, different kinds of negotiations. Is the negotiation something related to a specific case, a specific individual, or is it just a conversation about what might be involved in a negotiation? How does one negotiate? If you're sharing news about a development, absolute, absolutely. A threat of contact information from existing email accounts. Indeed, if you don't blind things properly, very, very easy to reveal information that shouldn't be, that it's not public. Witnesses, consultants, vendors, photo sharing sites that host photo. Indeed, this is what I'm learning now too, as again, someone who is not a native to social media. Again, the picture sharing can be very positive, but it can also lead to things being shared that we don't expect or that we don't anticipate. You know, a picture speaks 1,000 words. So having a picture of what a document looks like or what a courtroom looks like for someone who's never been in one, that's great. But having one that has actual people in it or a court, uh, uh, excuse me, a case going on reveals things that ought not. Geo-mapping sites, yes, users' location information. It could permit lawyers to reveal information such as current investigatory trip or meeting. Indeed, these are things that's it's okay. I went to the legal profession because by and far they have they have done a lot of thinking in terms of rules and regulations, and it makes sense based on what they're there for and what their jobs are and actually how they're wired. And they've done so much work in ethics. Tell me another field where ethics has been as deeply investigated and probably as minutely regulated or managed as the legal profession. Medical, exactly, Anne. Absolutely. Mental health. Yep. Yep, yep, yep. And I think it's because there are such fine lines between what we talked about briefly earlier, the idea of information versus advertising, and the ideas of confidentiality. Because consequences of revealing information can be very, very damaging, damaging consequences. Social work, yep. So I think those are all part of the inputs. They look at, again, that past history. What's happened in the past? How can we protect from it again? What's the importance to distribute information versus the importance to keep it private? What is public and what is private? What is information? What is advertising? And how do we make those distinctions? Ah, the teaching field itself. Yep. All right. I see Anne is typing as well, so we'll give her a minute and then we'll move on to the next question. Oh, and a couple others. Yep. Yep. Yes, we've seen a huge increase in the amount of legal advertising on television as well. I think that's a national trend, and I know that what's been interesting to me is I travel quite a bit, and when I was in California, if you can believe it, and I'm located in New York, I actually saw a billboard for upstate New York litigators. So there is great competition for the work. Pharmaceutical companies. Hmm. Ethics, 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 ethics. All of these may seem far removed. Yes, they do bombard the media as well. Yes. Yes. Yep. Radio advertising. Yep. These are all places that where the lines can be crossed. Must act competently to safeguard information relating to the presentations of a client against inadvertent or unauthorized disclosure, and must choose a method of communication that has a reasonable expectation of confidentiality when transmitting information. Thank you, Janet. Thank you, thank you. Yes, that's a great way. Keywords there, reasonable expectation. Can we ever fully assure that the information we're conveying is completely private? No, exactly. So we do our reasonable best. And acting competently. Acting competently. I love that part of the scenario where they talk about there are specific educational coursework available for those in the legal profession so that they can learn more and understand more about how their communication can be ethically conveyed. Ready for another question? All right. So it may seem that this is far removed, but how might this scenario apply to the business of recovery and recovery coaching itself? Yep, violation of HIPAA. And let's think of some of the positives. How might this scenario apply to both the business of recovery and recovery coaching? Privacy, privacy, trust. Got it. Violation of trust. Thank you, Danielle. Absolutely. People can be better informed. A network of legal assistance for arrests. Hmm. Explain that. I think you mean crossing understanding from the legal profession how they might create something for us or help us navigate. Help me understand that, Anne. That's neat. Ah, okay. Okay. Working with lawyers and prosecutors during client charges. So that's you took this to another level, and I think that's absolutely. There may be a way to interact with other professions in an ethical manner that serves our clients or our recoveries. Yep. Clients try to friend me. Yep. Uh-huh. So some of the positives are what we're doing right now. We're having a conversation about our ethical considerations, and you've all put a considerable amount of time into this. And it's meaningful and necessary when we're doing our work competently and with a reasonable expectation of ethical conduct. So thinking about it in advance of an incident, if you will, or thinking about it in a larger context is one of the positives that come out of understanding that other professions have done this work for us, have actually given us road maps on what to consider and how we might approach um, things such as information versus advertising. Let's think about that in terms of the business of recovery. How do we differentiate between information and advertising? Yes, generating business. Are there those who are in the business of recovery who might be considered advertising? Information being promoted should not be reasonably understood as a recommendation or an endorsement of a firm, or in this case, a recovery, uh, say, community center's credentials, abilities, or qualities. Hmm. Yes, yes, Glenn, I understand. Recovery coach is fine, but again, yes, there are even questions about what to put on there. Um, Community-based recovery support. That's what we keep talking about. Community-based recovery support. What does that look like? What does that mean? If we keep it in the realm of information, that's a person can share experience and suggest someone goes for support where they receive services. Right, that's a recommendation. That's a recommendation. Hmm. And education, education, education. Being able to speak freely about what recovery is, what recovery looks like, keeping that informative. Um, that seems to be well within the realm of acting responsibly. When you, again, tie it to a specific treatment facility or a specific organization, that's when you get into the ethical considerations. How much of this is for information? How much of this is for um, lead generation? How much of this is for new client uh, acquisition? What can we put in place? Well, let's take a look. I know this is small on the slide, but I believe you have it from your pre-work. This is just one example, very simple, of a decision-making matrix, just a little visual tool to help make some of those decisions. And in regards to this scenario, so there's an ethical consideration. You know, should I post this or should I not post this? Should I publish this or should I not publish this? Should I share this or should I not share this? That's an ethical consideration. So then I have to think about, all right, what are some of the things that I might consider? Laws, rules and regulations, my own personal or professional values, any institutional pressure. We talked a little bit about that last week with Jorge, the recovery coach manager. Some social expectations. Maybe there are some more. And then we have to think about that. We have to reason within ourselves, with our professional peers. We have to think about all of those things. Those might be considered our inputs. And when we put that through the crucible of our reasoning, you know, what's in the best interest of the public at large? What's in the best interest of our recovery? What's in the best interest of our organization? What's in the best interest of community-based recovery support, the availability of it, the understanding of it? All of that goes into that center part, that reasoning part. And hopefully, we'll come up with our ethical decision that gives us the best of all possible worlds. Will it be perfect? Nope. Will it be, will we have a reasonable expectation of acting ethically because we're thinking about all these inputs? It will evolve. You're right. It will continue to evolve. Absolutely. And we all have ethical responsibilities. We've talked a lot about that and we've gone over those terms many, many times. I like that, Glenn. Yes. We can at least have something to fall back on. So if somebody asks, how'd you do that? What'd you come up with? Whatever made you think of that? What made you think you should do that? You can actually look and say, well, you know, we put it through our decision-making matrix. We had a reasonable way to approach and a consistent way, I guess is a better way to put it, a consistent way to approach our decision making in this organization or as a private recovery coach or um, in provision of service within our communities. And this was the best we came out with when we considered all of those things, whether there were laws, rules, or regulations, how I personally felt, and then how I professionally felt. What was in the best interest of my institution in light of all of those other things? Absolutely. A matrix, having some kind of consistent decision making uh, format, matrix, chart, it can be as easy as a plus and a minus, um, can give us something to fall back on. So, absolutely, Glenn. Thank you for that. Any other thoughts? I know as recovery coaches, we talk a lot about having to think very quickly in the moment because we're one on one with people, and people are unique. Their situations are unique. Their responses to situations are unique. So, why then would it be important to have something like this or create something like this for yourself? How would that help you think in the moment? How would that support your thinking or decision making in the moment? Code of conduct for recovery coaches. Yep. You keep it in the back of your mind. It's like anything else. I think when you practice, 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 then the actual performance is a little bit easier. I see Jamer's typing. Yep, fair and balanced in my work. That's right. Because again, we're human too. We're humans working with humans, and we are impacted by emotion and situation. Preventing harm, which is the last thing we want to do. We can think before we speak, type, tweet, or text. I love that line. Thank you, Janet. That's perfect. You could get it on a t-shirt for recovery coaches. Think before you speak, type, tweet, or text. I like that. Are there any remaining thoughts or inputs or comments you want to make about the depth and breadth to which the legal profession has considered ethics, um, put provisions in place to act ethically, and or about this decision-making matrix before we move on? Yes, for a t-shirt. Yes. Yes, of course. Please do. Please do. Please do. That's okay. Just pose it as best you can, and we'll do our best to, and again, the whole group will do our best to answer. If we see something on social media, and it may be a threat to a child or a threat of suicide, physical harm, elder abuse, or do we have a mandatory reporting requirement? Great question. Great question. Anybody want to field an answer from your organizational understanding or your professional understanding? Or is it something that's established at the beginning? Great question. I love that people are feeding answers. I'm seeing people typing, or as soon as the information becomes available to us. Great questions. Consult with your supervisor. Absolutely. Ideally, there would be an organizational framework in place. You would understand whether in your state what the mandatory reporting laws are and how they apply to social media. What if it needs immediate attention? Based on your company policies, which you follow first, then I'm not mistaken, social media has ways to report postings that are inappropriate indeed, because should we be fail to report, we could be held liable. Yep, the context of the post, and if you're actually able to get an immediate response. Supervision, supervision, supervision becomes crucial. Yes. And yes. And civil and criminal justice systems have ways of yeah. Yep. So being proactive, I think this is one of those situations where being proactive is absolutely a necessity. Knowing indeed what are the rules that already exist within your organization, your state, what are the mandatory reporting parameters. Schools have dealt a lot with this very question. I see Janet's typing a little more. Okay. I'm not sure if you're still typing, Janet, or if the key is just stuck. So are we ready to, oh, there it is. There we go. I know when we have a report of an overdose, we have to wait until it is confirmed before we call any of the partners we have releases for. So for example, if I read one of my clients had OD'd on social media, but there was nothing to do until it was confirmed. Ouch. What I believe to be right isn't always right for everyone. All journeys are different. Thank you, Danielle. That is one of the critical pieces of this is, again, we're humans dealing with humans who are impacted by unique situations, emotions, inputs. We do the best we can. Supervision, supervision, supervision. Yes, yes, yes. Okay, I see Anne is typing, and then we'll take this one more comment, and then we'll move on. Because if you liked this first scenario, I think the next one's going to you're going to like this one too. I love the deep thinking. I'm waiting for it to come through, Anne. Oh, I don't want to move on without your comment. All right. Conflict of interest, being on a narcotic committee, legal assistance, and working with families that appear before the drug court judge. There are layers and layers there, aren't there? Again, dealing with the individual, trying to think about the confidentiality and best service to the recovery, and yet uh, there are expectations, I'm sure, on all of those layers. Yes, yes, yes. Yes, yes. Perfect example. Thank you, Janet. I'm going to move on. I do love all the considerations. So and I'll read slowly. We're going to take it into a different realm. An EMS team arrives at the home of an elderly couple and finds the husband unresponsive on the floor. The wife appears to have a major neurocognitive disorder and is extremely agitated and physically aggressive. The husband is in cardiac arrest, but the team sees no evidence of a pre-existing DNR order, whether a bracelet, pendant, emergency instruction pouch on the refrigerator. After redirecting the wife, the EMS team provides CPR to the husband for several minutes. The couple's daughter arrives and states her father would not want to be resuscitated, and she thinks he has a DNR on file with his doctor. It is late, but she attempts to reach the doctor, who confirms that yes, indeed, the order does exist. The EMS team immediately stops CPR and provides palliative care during the dying process. This medical standard has been approved and adopted by the American College of Emergency Physicians. So I'll paraphrase. EMS team arrives, man is in cardiac arrest, wife is not able to comment on the situation. They do what they're instructed to do and begin CPR. A related party comes in, indicates there may be a reason to stop, confirms that yes, indeed, there should be a reason to stop, and they stop. So yes, Janet, the EMS team acted responsibly. Yep, immediate responses to this scenario. I see many of you are typing, so based on the immediate information they had at the time of the emergency, yes, 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 yes. See, Anna's typing, Jamer's typing. All family members, yes, and they did exactly what they should do. They're trained to save lives unless circumstances or info is released to them. That's right. There's nothing unethical about their responses. They did the right thing. Exactly. This was a pretty clear-cut situation. They had a protocol in place. Yep, followed. They may have spoken to him directly. There may have been, again, we have smartphones. Maybe he was able to, this is where social media might help, or at least electronics might help. He could snap a picture of the DNR. There might be ways to do that. That's a great point, though, Davey. Thank you. Great, yes. So, sorry, I went too fast. So, what were some of the components that were in place or the processes that were in place? What were some of the inputs they considered when making those decisions in the moment, that EMS team? The information received from the daughter, absolutely. An input that was then enabled by a process, which is confirmation of the DNR. They followed protocol. Yeah. The doctor confirmed. Absolutely. Yes, that's right. That was one of the inputs. There was no input. They didn't have a bracelet or a notice in plain sight. Again, I love that there are now very visible pouches that can be placed right on the refrigerator. However, if you're not anywhere near the refrigerator, but most EMS teams know to look there. And they were dealing with an elderly person as opposed to someone younger, so it was highly likely there might be an advance directive. Tell me about the wife. They were, yep, in crisis. They did as they were trained. They tried to get information from the wife. They were fortunate that the daughter was informed and involved. A static cling vinyl sticker on our window. That's fantastic. Yes, it's a little bit like the old child finder stickers that I remember growing up. We would place in the windows where the children's bedrooms were. And the wife was not able to assist. That's right, but that was an input they had to think about. They had to then navigate that relationship and as well and redirect her to another place so they could do what they needed to do. Yep, training to evaluate situations in possible life or death is crucial. I had occasion to be in Massachusetts at a an ambulance company, and the training that goes on. They also train EMS personnel at this site. It's an educational facility as well as a deployment, I guess would be an easy word to put that. And they have, as part of their training, they have uh, scenario reenactment, a ton of role play, and they're tested on it. What do you do? How do you do this? So, because they have to act so quickly that they practice. Yes, yes. There's very little emotion at that point. It has to be in the moment by the book. So, again, having those standards in place, having that as part of the educational paradigm for people who do this work, having rules and regulations, having a protocol, having a way to think about it in advance. So let's consider, how might this situation have been different based on different inputs? So the daughter, she was an input. She showed up on the scene and she had information. Uh, yep, yep. The EMS would have continued. And again, it's pretty clear if they had seen a DNR or had some form of communication, that would have been a completely different input. And they would have, yes, absolutely. I believe so. Yeah, because then you're talking to a representative on the phone from the life alert. Yes. Yeah. Not always practical, I guess, if you're in, pajamas or something of that nature, but yeah. And again, this scenario included an elderly couple. It could have, yep, have the info listed with your personal ID, indeed. Just like on our driver's licenses, whether it says if we're an organ donor or not. We could keep some kind of card, and many organizations that work with end of life issues, whether for the critically ill or the elderly, have actual little cards you can put in your wallet. Yep, I've seen those as well. I don't know, Anne. That's a great question. It's a great question. I I don't know who would maintain that. Um, again, yes, there would be. I think you're right. One for DMR. Nice. Yep. Very nice. Again, the more information, that's a great point, Janet. The more information we can provide in the moment, it helps direct those decisions and helps us follow protocol because again, we've considered these things in advance. So let's ask another question. Ethical committees are a staple among the medical and legal entities. How might they serve and function within the field of recovery coaching? And how might they be structured? How might we go about utilizing ethical committees? Yep, the parameters for which services can be provided and instructions around specific types of situations. Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. We can anticipate, we could talk about, we could come with a scenario prepared and discuss with our peers. It's proactive, absolutely. Public support meeting of Families Against Narcotics and have a large advisory board. Yes, yes, an advisory board. They help answer what is within the legal ethics and can refer people to best resources. Mostly teaching and proper function. Indeed, indeed. Yep, a lot of, again, auto education, keeping up to date, knowing what to do. I met with a couple of women who have an ethics committee and they do meet regularly and they come with a prepared scenario and they discuss it. And it can be based on something that they've actually experienced or something that they anticipate. And they want to get feedback. They want to understand what's within the rules. How can we act ethically, thoughtfully, meaningfully for our people? Ensure that protocol is being followed. Absolutely. Absolutely. And again, how might they be structured? Pretty much any way an organization or a learning collaborative sees fit. You can meet monthly, you can meet weekly, you can meet uh, again periodically as able. You can ask for inputs from your advisory board. People can come and present. They're the sky's the limit. We're creating them now. I see Anne is typing. meeting monthly with the drug court judge, doctors, counselors, and they have a set forum to discuss monthly, and it's open to the public. That's very transparency, a great piece, for this. I want to show you another picture of another kind of decision-making matrix, basically just a visual tool to help make decisions. This one, again, a little bit different than the last one. We're looking from low to high, whether there are internal or unseen influences, and low to high, the complexity of the decision. In this scenario, it seemed like a pretty straightforward decision, what to do. It wasn't too complex. There were some internal and unseen influences, which increased the risk that they might be doing the wrong thing in the moment, but then that was mitigated by the input of the daughter and the DNR. How might this, how might the components of this decision-making matrix impact decision-making for, say, recovery coach professionals? Ah, absolutely. An overdose situation. How does just seeing a visual tool for decision making, how does seeing or laying out your decision help? And Anne says, we don't know what was used, how much, when. Has Narcan been administered? And calling for professional assistance. Exactly. There are a lot of unseen influences. The decision is relatively, it's made more complex by the unseen influences or the internal influences. We know what our immediate motivation is, but again, all of that impacts our decision making. So how does seeing your decision laid out, how can that be helpful? Yep, yep. A place to assess, a pause. If we see illegal activity or know first that it has occurred and could cause life or death or arrest, making that legal and ethical decision. Reminds us to follow the same CCAR protocol, make sure we're staying within the guidelines that we're there to do. We also use Narcan. Yep. Having a tool, it's sometimes easy. It's a little bit like math. I think of it like math. When I was learning math, I'm not a native mathematician, so it was a little difficult for me. And just hearing of a process or how it worked or understanding that there were processes, it didn't make it very clear for me. But once you laid it out in a formula and you had that formula and you could plug things in, it just served to clarify what was what. And it made getting the answer not always easier, but at least a little more clear how to get the answer. And it provided, again, just a visual framework for all that stuff that was in the moment, all the stuff that was going on in my mind. So when making decisions, again, there's so much that's at play when making decisions. There are, again, legal concerns and social responsibilities and personal ethics and professional ethics. And so laying it out in a visual can often be helpful just to kind of get all that stuff out to clarify the decision-making process. All right. Any last comments before we move on? Okay. Well, then once again, I have randomly and as equally as I'm able, because we're a group of 7 today, apparently, assigned each of you to a breakout room. Oops, somehow I ended up in one. So let me get out of there. There we go. I'll put you in your rooms and I'll give you microphone permissions at that point so you can talk to each other and you can consider the questions. Um, Again, the questions will be posted in each room. Breakout room, and here, let me pop them up there so we can see them. There you are. Breakout room 1, we're going to take a look at question 1. Breakout room 2, if you could come up with some thoughts about question 2, you might want a pencil and paper at the ready. And then breakout room 3, if you would consider question 3. And then after you've considered your primary question, yep, I will tell you who's in what room before I put you there. So in breakout room 1, I have Euphemia, Jamer, and Janet. In breakout room 2, I have Danielle and Glenn. And in breakout room 3, I have Anne and Chip. I'm trying to mix it up so you get a chance to work with everyone. So again, once you've looked at your question, if you would then, pay some mind to the others, that's fine. And then we'll come back together. And I will, of course, come visit you after I break it up. And let me do this. I'll give you all your microphone rights. Look at all those microphones. And I will start the breakouts. Hi, Davy. I'm glad you checked back in. I'll put you in one of the breakout rooms, please. And I see you have a microphone, so I'm hoping that you'll be able to help communicate with one of the rooms that's having audio issues. Hi, Davy. Did you get bumped out of your room or did you have to sign back in? No problem. No problem. Let me pop you back down to room, I believe you were in 2. All right, let's try that.
For their committee.
Right. Then ensure that it's effective.
Okay. Well, thank you for those of you who were able to discuss robustly with your microphones. I appreciate it. I appreciate those of you who used the discussion bar and the chat boxes for when you were having audio issues. These are pretty, as I said in the broadcast message, these are pretty multi-layered and complex questions. So again, it's a quick think. It's really just what drives your discussion forward. So I'm going to ask for, I'll have you mute your microphones, or I'll mute them for you, and then I'll ask for some input from each of the groups. And we'll start, if you will, with group 1. And does somebody want to report out? You can put your hand up and I can decide who's. I know a couple of you are on phones, so that's not actually going to work. So is there someone who wants to report from group 1? Huh. Okay. Yes, I saw that, and that's unusual. Usually it's the box that's assigned to your room, so we'll check that technical situation out. Again, I'm glad there's a chat box as well, so that you can see what's happening in the chat in just your room.
Well, for the sake of time,
Oh,
this is
it didn't
Euphemia.
post either. Well, that's. Hi, Euphemia. I understand you had some
So
challenges with the
yeah,
technical parts of
but
this. So yeah,
that's okay. We were able to talk. But if my group
that's
members,
great.
Jama and Janet, want to chime in, I can give some, and then they can give some of what we talked about. If that's okay.
Yep, I'll
So
unmute both of them.
as we're a team,
There you go, team.
so
Team 1. If you would.
does anyone want to start? Okay.
Go ahead.
So all right. So we looked at the ethics committee, which we were establishing, and it was determined that we have to write a policy. Something else we considered was having a committee conscience. We also wanted to look at roles and responsibilities, but also rotate the roles so that people don't get overwhelmed and not want to participate. And as the committee grows, we want to ensure that the policies and procedures that are put in place are effective and that they're still relevant. And if they aren't, that we would have to come together as a committee to make the necessary modifications.
Mhm.
Jamer, you want to talk about how often and when we would meet?
As far as whether we would meet, I mean, like I said, that would depend on how a person's availability. So, It could be any time. It can be once a month. It can be once every 3 months. It just depends on the agency and who they're willing to send, because it has to be somebody that's designated. If you're looking at sending people from an agency, you would have to send them during those work hours, and then you would have to have somebody that's willing to do it. If you don't have that, then it's not going to work out. But trying to look at having people meet after work, that's not even feasible, because people have lives and they're going to be doing other things after work. So it will be an agency thing. I think it will be needed to be designated by the agency, a person that would actually be on the committee to be able to go. Then you would have to look at schedules. You have to take that into account also, as people are doing their work, at their agencies independently. They would have to make sure that they're able and allocated to do that. So I can't really define like a meeting time or date. I couldn't really do that without knowing everybody else's availability.
Well,
And
what we
also
did-
the
go ahead.
committee could be, instead of having to travel now with technology, you could do something like a video conference or a web, similar to this conference call or something.
But we also noted that it would be important to have it at the same, like around the same time, whenever it's being held. So it would be like a certain date at a designated time. So if somebody couldn't make one meeting, they would be able to know that it would be ongoing at a specific time and date.
Absolutely. That you guys
And
really,
then we also thought about the importance of who we would have on the committee so that we had a good representation of all the different perspectives that would be relevant to the fields that we're setting this committee up for.
And it would include people who have been in recovery also.
absolutely. Did you think about who you might consider guiding these efforts?
Well, we talked about, as Janet just said, having a group of people to come. So it would be multi-level. We would have the views of the legal representation, people who are affiliated with the drug courts, mental health, social services, social workers, therapists, and peers. So we would all come together to facilitate the meeting, and the facilitation could be rotated so that the burden is not on one person.
That's fantastic. That's really thoughtful. And I did pop into the room and I appreciate it. I know Jamer was commenting on the idea of components and parameters and understanding that you'd have specific materials and you'd have actual tangibles that you would incorporate into your meeting. That's part of the components. And I appreciated that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Any thoughts from the rest of the group? Anyone? Okay, are we ready to move on to question 2 then? And this one was a little more difficult. Again, if you had a pencil and paper, that'd be great. But again, you can just think about it in your head. For those of you in group 2, if you were designing your own ethical decision-making matrix, what would you consider? How would you determine your sweet spot? And how would you make sure that it got used across the board? And I think we had some audio issues in room 2, so please go ahead and answer via the chat box if that's what's needed. And we'll all pay attention. Group 2. I think Danielle, were you in group 2? I think.
I have my microphone on.
All right. Is that Chip? Who am I
This
hearing?
is
Glenn? Oh, hi, Glenn.
Yeah.
How are you? Were you in group 2?
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Great. Then between the two of you, I would love to hear your responses. I know you had some major technical difficulties. I appreciate it. And again, it's technology is a boon and it can be a bust if it's not working robustly. So let's look at that together then as a group if we can. If you would indulge me and we'll look at it together. Say you've been asked to design your own ethical decision-making matrix, your own visual tool. So what kind of inputs would you consider?
Well, basically,
And anyone can
I
answer. We'll use
mentioned the
the
Pac-Man scenario, and that what is on your flyer. That's what I call it.
oh, the what from
Ethical question for.
I see what you meant by that. I had it. I saw you make that comment, and I didn't have an immediate reference. But you mean that first visual that we used with the blue, that looked like the Pac-Man.
Correct.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep. So that had a variety of inputs that would be valuable. And how about the sweet spot? When you're making a decision, again, how do you determine the sweet spot?
I'm not quite sure on the definition.
So I guess for me, the definition of the sweet spot is the best case scenario, right? How you make sure that the ethical decision is, I guess, the best it can be based on the inputs and the outcomes. So
A
in that
consensus
first,
from everyone involved.
yeah, consensus. That's great. It goes right back up there to the point of the ethics committee. If you're working in a group or you're among a group of recovery coaches and you all are following the same kind of visual tool and rules and sort of parameters that are set by your ethics committee, then again, working in tandem with each other, coming up with consensus. That's a great way to do that. Any thoughts, feedback? Anybody ever have to make a decision and just draw it out with something as simple as pluses and minuses? Most everybody I've ever known has approached some decision with just a simple, what are the positives? What are the negatives? What are the...
All the time.
Absolutely. Yes. Yep. So here's the other part of that question then. How might we encourage other recovery coaches in the organization to use a visual tool?
Encourage them by showing them that this decision making actually works.
Yeah. Yep. Have a little bit under your belt and say, in this case, this is what we did. These are the inputs we considered. These were the possible outcomes. This is how we made this decision. And boy, this tool helped. So again, having that in place, having a little experience with it. And again, this is a really big question, but just like, yep, help them create their own model. Thank you, Danielle. One of the things that goes all the way back to that legal scenario is that a lot of these ethical guidelines, if you will, have been formalized across the profession. And they have some professional organizations, trade organizations that are very, very involved in helping to craft tools that are then for use across the profession. Can you foresee a time when that will be, you know, something that recovery coaches will have at their disposal? How do we formalize things across a profession? Big question.
Forum or communication with other people in the profession
Yes.
as to what
You,
worked for you.
yep, absolutely. We talk a lot about that again, that phrase, that learning collaborative. Things like this webinar are helping us do that. Again, we're all geographically diverse. We bring our experiences with us to this room, to this place, and we share it. Yep. And certification has its
We
own
have to
ethical
share
considerations.
voices.
Yep. Yep. Chip, can you elaborate a little bit on that certification brings ethical consideration as well? Because I think I know where you're headed with that. Tell me more. I see Chip's typing, so yep, yep. Being certified, working with guidelines, that's right. There's an obligation. If states are starting to, um, again, require certification and develop certification pathways, then they should also, at the same time, be developing standardized guidelines so that those who are certified are operating within a consistent paradigm. It's already laid out. That's right. That's right. That's yeah. And hopefully that will provide some guidelines. Because again, all of these decisions are made within, when we talk about parameters, the best way I think of that is guidelines. What are some of the things that are considered for boundaries or guidelines to help us? Let me go ahead to room 3, and I think, Anne, I think you were in there, so let me unmute you. And Chip, I think, were you two in room 3?
Yes,
Is that
he was.
correct? Great. So tell me, when you were talking, what are 3, if you came up with 3, and if not, just what were some of the biggest ethical challenges that are currently faced by recovery coaches? What did you come up with?
People are trying to solicit for medical, legal, confidential advice, which we're not any of those. We're strictly
That's
recovery coaches, and setting those boundaries.
that's a great
I
point.
was,
What lane integrity.
Mhm. um, as far as opportunities for ethical behavior of what they present, basically, Chip had said it's basically letting them know our boundaries and follow, staying in our lane. I was approached last night at a meeting where one rehab was raided and they were closed down, and another facility is opening that building up as a women's rehab, and they approached me to work there. I'm not one for gossip, and boy, it was flying last night, and I had to set a lot of boundaries very nicely. And there was professionals there, and there were also recoveries in that meeting, and we were all chatting afterwards. And it raised a lot of ethical questions that I need to bring up to our executive board.
Mm-hmm.
And
And I think that you
so
bring a good point. Go ahead,
go
I'm
ahead.
sorry. Well,
No,
I
no,
just
no.
think you've raised a great point that answers a little bit of that next question is how might they be addressed? And you said bring it to the board so that you can enhance the professional development of all. If, again, understanding how those conversations might have raised ethical challenges. Um, again, just knowing uh, how that might be perceived or what the unintended consequences of certain kinds of conversations might have helps raise the understanding of ethics and ethical decision making for all.
Yes, our judge, she is very ethical, and we have to watch what boundaries that we cross, that we can't cross when discussing issues with her, and she might be presiding over the case of the son or the daughter of one of our friends. So there's a lot of lines there. And if Chip wants to chime in and type something, go ahead.
Thank you, Ann. And I do see Chip is typing. Yep, the fine line when working directly with the courts, police, medical professionals. Yeah.
You're welcome.
So there is a fine line, but in each of those cases, the courts, the police, and the medical professionals, we benefit in some ways because they already understand pretty acutely the importance of ethics. They all operate within ethical paradigms based on their profession. So, and these are long-standing, ethical parameters, or they all have had these in place for quite some time. So we can actually learn from them too.
Yes, then that's what I'm trying to tap into, because recovery coaching in the area in Michigan where we are at is literally pouring through.
Can you say that again,
So
Ann?
we're
I missed
trying.
it. It's more,
I said
what?
it's like kind of a foreign territory. There's not a lot of recovery coaches in the
Thank you.
area where we live in Michigan. So we're trying to put basically be the same people and the best example that we can be for recovery coaches, so we can broadly expand because we need them desperately.
Yeah. And I love that. I love that that is actually one of the ways that, that is an opportunity. And it is also a challenge right now because, again, you are operating so remotely and with very little professional collaborative support that the risk of unethical behavior can be high. So again, if we're looking at a decision-making matrix, there are very few of you, and so your actions are a little bit under a microscope. So I love the point that you're trying to show how this is done very, very well so that people, understand what recovery coaching is about, and you can attract people to it and hopefully create some synergy and some powerful help where you are, and do so ethically and responsibly and thoughtfully for the recoveries. And that's a great point. Thank you.
Thanks.
Anybody want to comment? I'm going to go ahead and take away the mics, but we'll go back to the chat boxes. Anybody want to comment additionally on a question that was not originally yours? Any thoughts come to you from our discussions? Does anyone currently have an ethics committee in place? I see Anna's typing. And again, anyone think of other big ethical challenges that are right now being faced by recovery coaches? Nope, not at this time. You're not alone, Euphemia. You're not alone. Yep. I love that. Biggest ethical challenges faced by recovery coaches. Well, one of the biggest ones that I have, let's see what Ann says. We don't, and I'd like to find a manual model to set procedures for other recovery coaches and board committees to understand and follow. Okay, looking for resources. Looking for resources. So our newspaper has asked for myself and my partner to talk about some of our work that we've been doing in the community. That can raise some challenges. Yep, because again, looking at what is information versus what is promotion and or what is revealing information about someone with whom you're working. So again, keeping it informative, making sure that you have some control over what questions you answer or don't answer. As an independent, where to go for supervision or consultation. Absolutely. Yes. Yes, Glenn, I hear you. So again, trying to form a group collaborative. Working on a model with the town's law enforcement. Fantastic. Again, I liked the point that was raised earlier that with technology, we don't have to be geographically close to learn with each other. So Glenn, again, encourage reaching out to, again, even the people on this call. And if you have a question or an ethical concern, maybe we can have the beginnings of a learning collaborative right here. Great. Janet says that the health department is a big resource in our area. Yep. Yes, yes, yes. So one of the things that has come up recently as an ethical challenge is recovery coaches are being integrated into more and more facilities and organizations. So one of the ethical challenges is how do we maintain our unique role and place as recovery coaches within organizations who may not understand all of the um, the parameters, if you will, or the human components of recovery coaching. In other words, we're not so clinical. In fact, we're not clinical at all. And yet we're being now integrated into more and more clinical environments. And so there's a communication issue, there's an education piece that's huge. And so that's the opportunity. The challenge is, again, maintaining our integrity as recovery coaches, making sure that the work we do is still very personal, very subjective, very responsive to our recoveries. Yes, yes, yes. Yes, I agree. I think with the insurance providers are driving this, and I think that is a challenge. How do you introduce yourself? Hi, my name is Glenn. I'm a recovery coach. I love it. Well, what's a recovery coach? And then it starts that introduction, that dialogue, that piece of information, education. I mean, that's a great question. And then a lot of people will say, "Huh?" I see a couple of people are typing. So much to think about. I do love the way everyone's thinking together. This is it's gratifying for me on this side to see that so many smart people are thinking about how to do recovery coaching well. So, a 30-second elevator speech. Yep. Absolutely. Good to know. And Anne says we're trying to get with the drug court and case managers and probation officers and meeting with them a few times, and they take our integrity seriously. Absolutely. The more people know about us, and again, the more we act ethically, responsibly, consistently, the more people will know us, trust us. There's an old, again, I love that you brought up sales. There's a really old, um, I don't know what you would call it even. It's just a reality in sales that people only do business with people they know. So getting to know us, getting to know what a recovery coach is and does, and watching a recovery coach in action is one of the very best ways to get people to trust us, to do business with us, so to speak. And to rely on us. Great word. Thank you, Janet. Yes, to rely on us. Gossip. Gossip is a huge ethical challenge, especially in a small town. Indeed. Indeed. I know someone who does no work in his hometown for that very reason. Only works professionally outside of town. Because in town, that's where the recovery community is for this person. Great, great facility networking events for professionals, a way to talk about RC and, yep, to your professional peers. I'm going to go ahead and pop this up there because you guys are just throwing it out there. I love seeing and hearing the connections. I see a couple of people are typing, so we'll let that finish and then we'll scooch ahead. One of the key things, I guess, let's see, Glenn, if we didn't work in our area, no one would. Okay, well, that's fair. That's fair, Glenn. directly with 2 correctional facilities, as well as the drug courts, judges, probation officers, others, indeed, helping them understand who we are, what we do. And as far as gossip, when people start to gossip, I say, oh my, I have to go use the ladies' room. I'll be right back. And then I don't. I love it. Thank you, Janet. Perfect. There was an old phrase, again, an old phrase that says, small minds talk of people, average minds talk of things, and great minds talk of ideas. And while recovery coaching is a very practical application, it is a practical application of a really big idea. And that's pretty important to think about what we're doing, helping someone sustain his or her recovery, helping them find what works for them and coaching them in that process, coaching recovery. We're all going to take your line. That was a great one, Janet. So one of the things about ethics that I, like to think about is that we just need to have a sustainable way to make decisions over time. And all of these ideas, the committees, the matrices, they're ways of helping us define that. Wanting to be ethical is one thing, and then understanding the how, the what, the when, the where, the practical. How do we make ethics real? I love it. Janet made it real by saying, "Excuse me, I need to leave this conversation." Tactics, strategies, learning from each other. All right, I see Janet's typing. In grad school, we talked about ethics. My professor said if she was at a gathering and there was alcohol, she'd say, "Oops, I'm not able to comment. I have a glass of wine in my hand." That's a great one. That's a great one. Well, we can take away the idea that certain things might cloud our decision making at any given time, and we can be honest about that and transparent about that. So, yes, we can adapt it to what we're thinking. I think the idea is good. The literal reinterpretation of it may be problematic. Yes, as we said, coffee, coffee, coffee. So, are we ready to look ahead? Let's take a look. So again, this has been such a rich and robust discussion, and I really, really, really see it as the beginning of discussions. As I said, I mean, again, we are all in connection with each other via Stacy. Thank you, Stacy. So if there are ways to continue as a group, learning collaborative, ways to talk to each other, keep these dialogues going, that's what's going to be important as ethics, to highlight the importance of ethics within our profession. So some of the takeaway messages from today that I'm hoping we will leave with, an ethical decision-making strategy or a matrix. It can help both private and organizationally based recovery coaches act in an ethical manner, having some way to put your decision-making through a sausage factory, if you will. How do we get out what we want? How do we make the best decisions we can? Ethics committees will allow professionals to proactively address ethical challenges rather than reactively correct for them. Really important. Again, knowing ahead of time, or at least discussing ahead of time. Well, in this situation, what if? What is our protocol? Going back to the EMS guys, what's our protocol? What are our rules? And that organizations or recovery coach learning collaboratives can promote ethical behavior and support that ongoing professional development, setting up an ethics committee, perhaps. Working together to do that. What does it look like? How do we formalize it? How do we share it with other recovery coaches? Anything else? Any other messages you've taken away? I see a couple of people typing. PowerPoint documents in one email for us to print off in one. Great suggestion. Stacy is magical. We all appreciate all that she does and can do. Excellent, excellent, excellent. Brought up at the next Families Against Narcotics meeting. Great. Any last questions or comments? Yes, yes, Danielle. There are surveys for each one, and we'll be taking that feedback pretty seriously. I know that, again, one thing that CCAR loves is the feedback because then we're able to improve the delivery and content of the trainings we offer. So that's thank you, Euphemia. Thank you. I really enjoyed learning from everyone. I love all the input from the different areas and the different experiences you have. Yes, thank you. Oh, thank you, Janet. Sure, I can do that right now, Glenn. Let's see if I can turn on a mic. All right, Glenn, you should be on.
Thank you.
I
First,
turned
I'd
on
like to
everybody's.
thank everyone for participating in this. We need the input. Secondly, Blair,
Yes.
I'd like to present the question. I briefly spoke of a card. I don't even have a card to show somebody. When I do make one, can I refer to CCAI as being certified? And could I even use their logo? What are my boundaries?
Okay, so that's a great question for Stacy. I will paraphrase because a couple of people can't hear you. On your business card, Glenn is asking what things can he include, what can he not include, and the term recovery coach is absolutely an accepted term. However, CCAR is not the certifying body; they are the educational body. They've provided the training, so the way I've seen it done, and Stacy can confirm this, is that you can be CCAR trained or CCAR that you've completed the CCAR, Recovery Coach Academy. They're not the certifying body. Usually, the certifying body is like in New York State, it's either the New York Certification Board or the what they call ASAP. The New York Certification Association. There are two different bodies in New York State. I know in Connecticut there's another body. So you can check at your state level what certifications are available for recovery coaches, and then what requirements there are to say you are a certified recovery coach. However, on your card itself, you can say that you're CCAR trained, and Stacy probably has, yep, CCAR trained recovery coach. Again, logo issues are you can take that up with CCAR directly, and
Thank you.
thank you, Jamer. Yes, it has been very interesting, and I really loved listening. And yes, 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 yes. The more we think about ethics, the more we end up having to think about ethics. Sure. Okay, Janet. That's right. Thank you, Stacy. I see a couple of folks typing. Oh, somebody raised a hand. Yes, Glenn. Did you have more to add, Glenn? Because I've got you on.
Yeah, as an independent, where might I go for some ground rules or consultation with someone? Because I don't have supervision to go through.
Mhm. Uh, yes, thank you for all those additional educational resources and different kinds of trainings. Thank you, Janet. Glenn, in answer to your question, again, I would start at your state. What state where are you located, Glenn?
Michigan.
Michigan. Okay, I would go basically to your state, either Office of Alcohol and Substance Abuse or Mental Health Substance Abuse. Some states they're conjoined. I know there's a large number of folks from Michigan who are recovery coaches. Stacy, yep, it does have a certification board. Thank you, Stacy. I'm so grateful that you are the navigator of the entire country because you can tell who's what, and that certification board will help you understand what's needed to achieve a certification and or how you might contact other recovery coaches within the state to create a learning collaborative.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome, Glenn. And again, we're available for questions or comments, being able to get a hold of us to ask specific questions. That's part of this process. So there it is. Last but not least, the housekeeping. Stacy will send a follow-up email with another link to this recording as well as a third survey. And once that survey is completed, your certificates will be generated. And there it is, Glenn. There it is, the Michigan Certification Board. Stacy, you are truly amazing. Yes, indeed. I see multiple attendees typing. Thank you, thank you, thank you for giving all of this time and investing it in your ongoing professional development as recovery coaches, trying to understand and navigate this designation. So we have Massachusetts, Michigan, Maryland, New York. Oh, you're welcome. It is my pleasure. Thank you, Stacy, for sending that link as well. You're welcome. You're very welcome. Again, it is truly my pleasure. Have a great week, and I know we'll all be in touch at some point in future.